Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 1 of the Stevie Richards Show. We are so happy to have you here. So excited to be bringing something different here to YouTube as well to the pro wrestling space. I'm joined now and hopefully for the long-term future, my co-host, team member, and friend, James from WSI.
Hello, my name is James from WSI, as Stevie very kindly introduced me as. So some people may know me from WSI, of course, as well as Storytime with Dutch, Mantel, as the co-host and a couple of other YouTube channels as well. Really, my role here is to facilitate some questions and then stay out of the way for the most part. But we've got a lot of exciting things to bring fans of Stevie Richards on the Stevie Richards Show in the this episode and every episode coming up as well, including the return of the whiteboard, what went wrong, what went right, and all the analysis that everybody loves. Plus, so we're going to be bringing that to you, and we're going to be bringing the news to you. We're going to be bringing just human interest stories and backstage deep dives and delves into the pro wrestling lifestyle, and basically stuff that you want to know, you want to hear about. And I like to think we're going to be, Stevie's going to be more in-depth, more engaging, and more educational than anything else out there. I think that's something that we promise people. I think we can achieve that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think just the passion and the excitement for trying to bring something different, your organizational skills and the script writing, and also our pre-production meetings. You jokingly referred to me as your Zoom wife. You have been mine for the past few weeks too, because it reflects pro wrestling. How many pro wrestlers have you ever heard that, man, I talk and spend more time with the guy I travel with than my own wife? So we're starting off on that pro wrestling note. But explain to the people out there, and we'll go back and forth because we have great ideas, and that's the whole thing about having the Stevie Richards Show team with myself, you, Chris, and a lot of other people that are really pitching a lot of great stuff into the show. But let people know, what was our mission statement in the beginning and now from now on, episode 1 and after this, in making this different than any other wrestling. And don't say the word. I know you're going to call it a podcast. You're about to.
I'm so glad. Of all the things I was remembering, that was not something I'd remembered. Yeah, so we've done test runs and all this kind of thing. I mean, really, ultimately, because Stevie and I are both tech geeks, we're OCD, we want to make this as great as possible. Look at Stevie's camera. Look at my camera. For God's sake, this is HD both sides. This is 4K almost. I mean, this is going to be high quality, and that's really where it starts. And it's almost really where the mission statement ends. We're looking for quality, not only in the visuals, but in the content as well. We want to make this the best wrestling-based YouTube channel out there. Content-wise, as I said before, we're going to be doing a bit of news. We're going to be basically doing the most interesting stuff throughout the week, but it's always going to be some evergreen stuff there as well. We have segments coming up in the next couple of weeks on, should we give people what's coming up in the next couple of weeks that we've decided on, or should we just talk about this week?
Well, we talk about this week, but I feel like too that we have enough organization and we have a couple episodes already in mind for the next 2 to 3 episodes. We can at least give them a preview of what episode 2 would be. So I think that lends to the presentation of that we are already planning and writing notes and putting together the assets and everything, because that's also what's going to stand out. Is we want to have overlays, we want to have factoids, pop-up things, and of course in the whiteboard we're really going to take a deep dive into that. So every single episode will have some sort of smartboard segment where I will break down and analyze, much like I did on the previous wrestling analysis channel, which, as James always points out, it cut off at the worst possible time in the title of the YouTube channel. If you don't believe me, go look at it. And it's still the Stevie Richards Wrestling and then the first 4 letters of the last word.
Well, it's Pride Month, Stevie, isn't it?
It is. It is. And you know what? And we probably got some new demographic of viewers for that channel that were probably felt like they were baited and switched.
Well, YouTube does have guidelines on that kind of thing, I must say. Just to prove, that is my notes. So we have notes for, I don't know, the next 80 episodes already, ideas for the next 80 episodes already. So we're going crazy on just the ideas and everything else. But without further ado, let's get into the first of our subject. We're going to be ending on...
I think one thing, though, because I have your script. I'm going off your script in front of me. We haven't explained why we started fresh, why we started the Stevie Richards Show from basically, almost 0 subscribers instead of, in a way, just kind of pivoting with the wrestling analysis channel, which had 102,000 subscribers. And we really met about that a great deal, trying to figure out how we're going to make the first impression. What did we end up coming up with?
It took me a couple of days to actually remember why we decided to start a new channel instead of usurping the old. I mean, there was some copyright issues. Everybody knows this, who follows Stevie and AEW. And to be honest, I really don't think that did AEW any favors in the long run. I don't think that gave them some bad faith. But also, we decided this is going to be a true partnership between Stevie and WSI team, I guess. So in that sense, we wanted to start fresh. I didn't want to take over Stevie's channel because it's Stevie's channel. He built that. And if this is going to be great, which we hope it's going to be great, we'll build our own audience from it. So there you go. Stevie's got 100,000 subscribers on one channel. That is always going to be there if need be. But this is going to be a completely fresh, new concept with some of the old concepts with Wrestling Analysis channel as well. So we just thought, if it's good, it'll stand on its own 2 feet anyway. So we might as well start fresh. And the excitement out there, we've got nearly 10,000 subscribers. We've not even posted a video yet. So
it's
quite
pretty
clearly,
awesome. And also, you and I love to do everything the hard way. Hard way. We're planning on, tentatively, this is probably the next thing that we can kind of segue to. Right now, I have patreon.com/Stevie Richards. I've paused the billing. And I do, once again, you're going to hear this a lot. Thank you to each and every one of the Patreon supporters and also to YouTube subscribers and everybody else who's really with the AEW stuff and everything. We're going to talk about that in detail in a future episode, exactly blow by blow what happened with that once again. But for Patreon, we're looking at possibly either maybe keeping that, but we're sort of leaning towards future membership options, like stuff like maybe pre-production, post-production, a bonus smart board breakdown and analysis, and other things. We're just trying to figure out what we can do to bring even more value. But the base value of the actual free content is now our most important priority. It's paramount to get this right. So that's why we're not sure if it's going to be episode 5, episode 10, sooner or later, that we add some other perks. We want to get this right, and that way you get the most amount of value. And then we provide, hopefully, a little bit more peek behind the scenes. I get a pre-production, post-production, some other interaction, maybe video games like we talked about playing AEW Fight Forever, which is now like on sale for $10.
Isn't it on Pass Plus or something at the moment? Thing is, you're an
PS
Xbox
Plus
guy, and I'm a PlayStation guy. You're an Xbox guy. Well, I'm a PlayStation. I don't play it barely, but you can actually see it in the background of the shot. The PS5 is there, man. So I know you can't see because you're zoomed in, but everybody else can see a PS5 in the background. I mean, ultimately, I'm actually a Switch person. Mario is gaming.
Switch, I have to say this. We'll start off, nerdy already. Retromania Wrestling, the game that I was in and helped develop, and they put actually Stevie Richards Fitness in the story mode. The Switch version is amazing, and it's awesome. And I love the fact with the Switch that my wife and I can play Wii Sports and get up off the couch and just kind of play around and have these games. But I'm with you, but I'll get a PS5 only to play online with you. I'll do that. Good excuse to get another video game system. Don't tell my wife.
Haven't you got Steam?
I do not have Steam right now.
Oh, man. Right, so I've got Steam somewhere and a PS5. You've managed to get Xbox. And somehow we've got absolutely every console between us, none of them shared, apart from the Switch, which I don't think Fight Forever's on.
Their online is terrible. But this is a wrestling show, not a wrestling podcast. So we should probably get into that. But once again, for anybody out there, because video games and wrestling go hand in hand, if you want to see any of that kind of stuff as far as other fun categories of content, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here too. There's lots of serious stuff that we're going to talk about, but also at the same time, we want to have fun, we want to kid around, goof on each other, goof on ourselves. Nothing can be taken that seriously. So just keep that in mind. This is pro wrestling. It's exciting. This isn't easy. These guys and these girls sacrifice their lives literally sometimes with their families and everything in order to do this. But there is a lighter side that we can have some fun at the same time. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of not the best segue into our first story, though, in that sense of sacrificing lives and that and having fun. We're going to be talking about, because it's just in the order we've written them, Scorpio. first bit of news, Too Cold Scorpio. So, for those who don't know, I'm sure there'll be images put up, the censored images, of course. Reported on June 24th, Charles Skaggs, aka Too Cold Scorpio, had been charged with first-degree assault and 1 count of armed criminal action. He is currently out on bond and due back in court next month, so the rest of the write-up was from F4W Online. The charges stem from an incident that took place in the early hours of June 15th at a Love's travel stop location in Kansas City. Scorpio was working as a security guard in the store at the time of the incident took place and said the victim lit up a cigarette inside. The victim claims he put the cigarette out before entering the store, but it may not have been fully extinguished. Scorpio is said to have confronted the man, and an argument ensued. The confrontation continued outside the store when Scorpio alleges the man tried to grapple with him. Scorpio then told police that he pulled out a pocket knife. Now, just to briefly interject here, I've also heard that he may have claimed that he was reaching for brass knucks and then came out with a pocket knife. So, anyway, by the by, and stabbed the man in self-defense several times, as he claims. Police say that when they arrived, the man was lying on the ground, bleeding from several areas, including his abdomen, buttocks, legs, chest, and head. Police were able to speak with him later that day at a local hospital where he claimed Scorpio was the aggressor. I've interviewed Scorpio, very charismatic guy, streetwise, keeps it real. Apparently, still he does. You know Scorpio very well. There's a bit of a twist in the tale of this story at the end, isn't there, Stevie?
Well, I'm laughing at that, and I'm also, it's pro wrestling. Like I said, this is a very serious story. This is something that could have possibly had an even scarier ending. I mean, it's no fun to ever get stabbed, shot, or any kind of violence. Let's not forget, this is a Love's truck stop in Kansas City, Missouri at 3:40 a.m. And being somebody that's traveled and stopped at convenience stores at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when you're driving or you're going to the airport and you got to fill up before flying, anything could happen. And then to have security, which Scorpio was the dedicated security at this Love's truck stop. So there must have been issues or stuff going on. And we don't know what this guy said, except he dropped some F-bombs at Scorpio when he decided, there's a big kind of like argument. The guy saying, I put the cigarette out, but it might not have been fully extinguished. And tensions were high. The guy cursed at Scorpio. And as you said, Scorpio, he's an alpha male. He's going to keep it real and he's not going to be disrespected. But after the fact, after the stabbing and possible attempted murder, this guy's a huge fan of Too Cold Scorpio. So I don't know if Scorpio can sign some autographs and throw this guy some free t-shirts like we used to back in ECW when we would light people on fire by accident. Here's some t-shirts and tickets, and lawsuit avoided. By getting back to the serious note of this, although that is pro wrestling, literally got stabbed by a guy he's a fan of. And admitted after the fact, hey, I was such a huge fan of Too Cold Scorpio.
Yeah, was.
I'm like, okay. So we don't know. And with that, he was charged. But here's an interesting question. If this guy is a fan and Scorpio was supposedly doing it in self-defense, which means the guy was aggressive towards him, might have reached in his pocket to have Scorpio want to act, will he press charges or not press charges? That's also happens a lot with wrestlers and wrestling fan interactions.
But surely, if a charge, I don't know how it is in America, but if a charge is serious enough here, the police will pursue it regardless if there's a complaint or not. If it's like murder or attempted murder or something like that, the police will still investigate and bring charges.
I'm surprised that the actual charges were. I thought it was an attempted murder or at least aggravated assault or something more of a high felony charge. But assault is no different. It sounds like it's no different than getting into the fist fight. And then obviously it's been kind of upped, I guess, with that second charge, right?
Yeah, well, it's first degree assault. As I say, it's completely. I mean, we have the same system, but we've got different. Like grievous bodily harm, affray, actual bodily harm in this.
But then
country.
There's aggravated assault. That's what I'm saying. It's not even aggravated.
So this is first degree assault.
You get stabbed in your ass. That's a pretty aggravated assault. You might have to go to a YouTube channel to check it out that fits what you're looking for.
I'm actually Googling something right there, actually. And 1 count of armed criminal action. So I'm just Googling this. So first degree assault is a serious criminal charge typically applied when a person intentionally causes serious bodily harm to another person. So it's intent. there's active intent to hurt somebody badly with that. So I mean, that's going to carry some serious time if he's found guilty of it. In some jurisdictions, it may also refer to an assault that involves the use of a deadly weapon. So I think it's almost like a linguistical way of saying assault with a deadly weapon, more or less.
Yeah, and I guess because of the wounds and where they were at, if you stabbed this guy in like the chest or the stomach or somewhere where he could mortally wound him, that would probably be upgraded to that. But when Scorpio claims self-defense, this is going to be the courts, and I don't even know he'll have a court date and something else. Did he get released? Did he get bailed out, or is he still in jail?
No, he got bailed out. He is due in court in a month's time to answer the charges. So I don't know. Has Scorpio been arrested before? Do you know?
I'm not quite sure. I know Scorpio's been in some fights. We talked about it earlier about the infamous one from Dark Side of the Ring between him and Hawk in North Korea. And I've heard about some fights in Japan, but the fights throughout that era, especially, guys get in the fight, settle it. It's usually back to whatever, start drinking again, start hanging out on the bus. My question is with this is going to be possibly a very long, drawn out thing. I don't know. The self-defense thing is kind of something right there. I would definitely think that they would have to go to the surveillance video. There's probably surveillance video of this that hopefully will show that this was just something that got out of hand, and maybe Scorpio was self-defense, but he's still going to be charged with assaulting somebody with a deadly weapon. So it's, this is a wrestling show, but this stuff happens all the time. And we talked about this too, more of the human interest type thing, because this is something, as someone who's a fully retired wrestler now and was trying to find the next chapter of my life and kind of in some ways still trying to do that, James. It's an interesting study compared to, say, the NFL or pro baseball, or even over there with pro sports, that there's always a path for retired competitors, retired athletes, even retired people in Hollywood or acting, to have another career path. In sports, it's usually, hey, you're a commentator, you're a radio show host, you do analysis, you do something like that. It seems like the infrastructure and the system within the NFL, this is what I know with the National Football League, is it gives guys a lot of opportunities post-career. Where with wrestling, we see a lot of these, not to this degree in this way, but we see a lot of too-called Scorpios post-retirement, other people struggling to find definition of their lives, to find a purpose, a direction. And Scorpio's incredibly charismatic, incredibly athletic, this is a bad word to use, he's very disarming. That's not a good choice of words for this story, but he's somebody that could make it, and just like a lot of wrestlers, you can make it anywhere else. If you can make a name in wrestling, it's quite possibly the hardest job to feature yourself in any way and make yourself a star. So it's a weird case study that we might be able to dive deep into in future episodes about why this happens time and time again, that so many retired wrestlers or guys after TV or full-time TV careers seem to always never be able to find that kind of happiness or fulfillment after wrestling. Do you notice that a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. I tried to write a list once for a top 10 list that I never got around to because, I have a habit of doing that kind of thing and I just don't have that time to record them. But I tried to think of the wrestlers who had far better careers after wrestling than in wrestling. You would qualify, potentially, with the fitness stuff and hopefully with this podcasting thing and other stuff that you've done post-retirement full-time. Chris Nowinski. He turned a negative into a positive, that kind of thing. But there's pretty few and far between, really. I'm just looking at Scorpio's match listings. Had quite a lot of matches in 2024. He's had to cancel a tour of Japan because of now this criminal investigation. Because he can't make it, and I suspect he can't leave the country. And he's 58, and he's still doing it. And it's always going to be partially. It's tough to let go of the business, but it's also maybe there aren't really any other options.
It could be mixed in with both of those. I recall that I watched that TNA ECW pay-per-view, Hardcore Justice. When we had done that, I watched Scorpio and CW Anderson wrestle like I've seen both of those guys wrestle back in their supposed prime in ECW. And it's just like guys like CW and Scorpio, Billy Gunn, other people into their, mid, late 50s, even sometimes in your 60s, can still work. They just got a natural ability and a toughness. They're just so much more durable, in my opinion, to be able to wrestle almost, if not the same style, into their 50s. And let's not forget, Scorpio, if he's going over to Japan and flying internationally, that's enough to take everything out of you before you even wrestled one match.
Hmm.
You know that. You traveled a lot before we started the show. The travel, the flying, the hotels, the rental cars, or being on the bus in Japan, that's harder than any wrestling match you'll ever take a bump in.
We were talking about this yesterday, right? And we were trying to figure out who invented the 450 splash. It's not sad. It's good. I like to think of, but I have to look at these kind of things. So, it is believed to have been invented by Hayabusa, the 450 splash. Scott Steiner is believed to have done it first in America, but Too Cold Scorpio popularized it in America.
Scorpio was the first one to do it actually on national TV to get the credit where that's what I saw. And just to say one more thing about Scorpio, one of my favorite matches that made me want to continue in my early days of the business was Super Brawl 3. And I don't know if we can mention this name or not. Too Cold Scorpio versus Chris Benoit, where Scorpio went over what I believe just a handful of seconds left in the 20-minute time limit. And it was one of the most amazing matches. And I think that match there, I think, was the first match, at least on a national pay-per-view level, I could be wrong, where we got that style, that cruiserweight style for a casual fan and going, these guys are amazing. And they were not your classic cruiserweights. These were big dudes, jack dudes that were doing this kind of style. So Scorpio, in a lot of ways, is an innovator in that. Maybe not the first to do certain things, but he sure as hell made everybody take up and notice that style, and he can't be discounted for that.
I always wonder, how can he fly so fantastically? Because he's not built like, as you say, a typical cruiserweight. It's like 230, 240. Yet he's one of those people where I've heard this leveled at certain other wrestlers, and it is a compliment, where he makes it almost look too easy. It's like he's 6 foot, 240, 230, something like that, and he's as graceful as anyone.
I think a better term for that, because Sabu flies like a missile, especially when he's diving through the ropes. Scorpio floats, and he's almost like in suspended animation in mid air. That's why he makes it look so he can have like a cup of coffee in midair and then hit you with it. And that's the other thing. The 450, the moonsault into the leg drop was his finish in ECW. And also, I don't know why this impressed me so much more when, Alexa Bliss does that Twisted Bliss finish. Scorpio did that first, way, way back, where he would face the guy, but then turn his body and almost do like a Vader splash. Like he twist and then splash the guy. That takes an incredible amount of body control.
Do you know who else I always think just made flying look far too easy for what it is? Was Lance Storm. I always thought, if he did a drop kick or just something off, he always seemed to get far more hang time than you think it would be even possible. Slightly gravity defying as well.
And these are guys that don't do like heavy plyometric training or anything like that to jump even higher. So imagine if they did something like that. Imagine Scorpio if he had like plyo workouts within his regimen, like NFL jump workouts, and oh my God, he'd be drop kicking me 5 feet over my head.
Do you know, actually, in fairness with Lance Storm, I believe he played volleyball in his younger days, so that's probably where he got his jumping ability.
Nice.
Do
you want to ask me where I got my jumping ability?
Go on.
From sitting here and doing like shows like this. That's my extent. I put the plyo box on the 16-inch thing, and my toes clip it half the time.
Oh, I've given up on the plyo box age. I did one jump, and it was like on like a 24-inch one, and I jumped once, and then my back just went, and I just went, ugh, and I never went back to that class. That was
You
years
and I
ago.
are twins. You and I are twins in that regard. Same thing.
Just briefly with Scorpio, one more thing is, we're not telling tales out of school. Big weed smoker, that didn't help him in WCW, even though he was pretty darn popular there. And then later on, he ended up in getting involved with harder drugs that he eventually kicked. And that really didn't help his cause in WWF either. Is Scorpio basically his own worst enemy, or at least he's got some ruinous habits that have held him back? Because he was a decent promo as well. I mean, he's great in ring, but he wasn't a bad promo either. He had a lot going for him.
Well, he had a lot going for him. I feel like I wouldn't say he was his own worst enemy. I would say that in regards to the marijuana policy and everything, that he was far ahead of his time, because we talked off air about that too, that WWE is lightened that stuff. They used to find guys at least $2,000 or something per offense back in the day. And then obviously the suspensions if you continue to get caught. But I would rather guys be taking CBD, CBN, even smoking, doing whatever, rather than pills, alcohol, and those harder drugs that do that. So Scorpio, there's nothing malicious about the fact that the guy likes to do that. He doesn't bother anybody. It's not like he goes out there and when you drink or take, drinking especially can make people really, really violent. And I'm sure people have heard a lot of stories about even when Benoit drank, he was a monster. You know, people would avoid him, and I was one of those people that would. If he was drinking, I wouldn't. I didn't even stay in the hotels most guys did anyway, so I could avoid that very easily. But getting back to Scorpio, it's just, I believe it was just the timing of the policy and the way society viewed marijuana. Now in 2024, I think Scorpio would be fine. It's just they were so too stringent on the boys right then that they needed to kind of revert or resort to other types of drugs.
We shall move on, and we're going to be talking about next the Wyatt 6 gang. So the last couple of weeks, I mean, it's really been building up over the course of months and months and months with QR codes, months of teasers and the whole static thing. And then last week, as we record this, we're actually recording this on a Thursday, so we're talking about the week before briefly. Bo Dallas, Dexter Loomis, Joe Gacy, Eric Rowan, and Nikki Cross debut as the Wyatt 6. We don't know if there's going to be a 6th member or if Bray Wyatt's like the spiritual 6th member or something like that, but that's something that could be opened up for a later day. There's a follow-up on week 2, but let's stick with week 1 and the eventual debut of this group and how you thought it was shot and the impact that it made.
Well, this is probably going to be a hot take right here, but I believe the 2 weeks that we saw the Wyatt 6, especially with Bo Dallas in that week 2 sit down and interview with himself, is better than anything else Bray Wyatt did. Already better than what Bray Wyatt did. And just hear me out on this. It's not because of Bray. And it's not because of Bo even. It's because of who is producing or allowing these segments to be produced, which I believe Bray was not allowed to do that. We talked off camera as well about different things with wrestlers creatively, like what hill do you want to die on? And I believe Bray had to play that game with Vince McMahon. He had to play that game of, all right, I'll give Vince these 2 things and maybe I can get this one thing that I'm really thinking this is going to be great. And that's kind of the story of being a pro wrestler and dealing with creative and especially dealing with the owner / promoter is, all right, if I go up to this promoter, I got to make sure this is my hill to die on. And if it's not, I got to kind of let that go, give them that W, then come back. What I noticed with the Bo stuff, everything from that week 1 with the gorilla position, with the sparks flying, with people literally unalived, with it having a completely different look all around, still in the arena too, not even in a set. And then week 2, this is where people, like I break it down to almost an absurd technical thing. But when I watch these things as somebody that edits his own videos, you have to listen to the words in that promo. You have to pay attention in order to add like the scary horror freeze frame for half a second, the glitching, the halation, whatever other stuff, the film damage, all these things were not uniform across the video. They were timed according to the points that Bo and Uncle Howdy were making. and they also distorted the voice and made it different. And it was a great nod too that I'm sure Bo Dallas is a huge fan of Roddy Piper. We all are basically, but that goes back to when Roddy Piper interviewed himself. It was like one of the most creative segments for the 80s that I've never seen before. And this was a tribute to that. But the twist of everything, I just feel like Triple H and whoever's in charge, I would assume Jimmy Paradise, Jeremy Borash do all the cinematic stuff and have done, if you're not familiar with their work, the TNA stuff with Matt Hardy and the Broken Universe, Brother Nero, I Knew You Come, and all that stuff. That right there was Jeremy Borash and Jimmy Paradise towards the end. So that's what we're seeing. And I just feel like this is good. Now, the only thing I would say on a negative point, tell me if you agree or disagree, what's going to happen, as people famously say, when the bell rings? When the bell rings and you're in a professional wrestling environment, this was the problem that Bray had. Bray's character was amazing. Bray's presentation, the symbolism, all the really smart stuff that people who know about the conspiracies and other stuff like that really got into. But then your casual wrestling fan who brought his family doesn't understand how the Fiend can interact with Randy Orton or this person or even Goldberg or these other people. It felt like a huge disconnect. Do you agree with that?
So when I was talking with Dutch about these things, especially with the Fiend era, and Dutch has got a great booking mind for this kind of thing, and he's one of those people who can't. He never would have booked it in the first place like this because he kept saying, "Well, there's nothing to boo the Fiend for, because he's an ultimate badass. He can't get hurt." I mean, who was booing the Terminator? You know what I mean? Everyone was booing John Connor by the end of that film because the Terminator was the star. And ultimately, Dutch always said, there's nothing against Bray or Wyndham Rotunda, the person, but the Bray Wyatt character should have always been a babyface. But then he's got horror presentation. So it's a complete disconnect between what he should be doing and how he's presented. So, and everyone, apart from Randy Orton, who worked with him, as you said before, always seemed to come out looking less. And it didn't seem to build everyone up. It just seemed to make Bray Wyatt too strong. And then I don't think that the fans really were receptive to a lot of the matches quality-wise, because it wasn't like a wrestling match. It was like a mini horror film every time.
Yeah, I think what you're looking for as far as the term, it was basically just a walking, talking contradiction. Oh, he's a babyface. He's being everybody. It's a Sid Vicious thing. Sid Vicious ran through everybody and became popular to the point where even when he went back to WWF, like they were cheering him at the Garden and booing Shawn Michaels, who was the babyface champion, because he was a badass. Who doesn't want to cheer a badass, right? But what you also said that Dutch really made a great point about when it comes to Bray Wyatt, how can anybody relate or identify with the Bray Wyatt or Fiend character? Bo, you automatically can because we've all lost people that we love and care about. So, but once again, he's in the horror presentation. Uncle Howdy is basically kind of an evil character. So how you're going to honor Bray, but also you're going to unalive a lot of people. And the innocent victims got, of course, they come back the next week and win the match. But innocent victims got pretty much taken out. So, but I would say, I'll stick to my point. The Bo stuff in the first 2 weeks was amazing. It was better than anything Bray did because the handcuffs, I believe, were fully off, and the support of the machine made that whole first scene with the gorilla position, the lighting, everything else. And then, of course, the next week, it takes, for us to do this show, takes a lot of preparation. Imagine having to do that interview and, setting it up to mask both sides and have Bo go do the interview in one outfit, then do the interview in another. That was probably produced over the course of a couple of days or maybe 3 days. They worked hard on that.
I remember hearing or reading probably the Dude Love Cactus Jack Mankind. It's a very, very famous interview where they got all three of them and he's every character. And he said that took them 8 hours to record. It was a solid day's work at Connecticut HQ in the basement. Something I really want to ask you. There was one thing on the first week where they go through gorilla position that people aren't really mentioning, is that they actually established the gorilla position as a set earlier in the day with Drew McIntyre, which is really interesting. It's almost like a Chekhov's gun thing where you set up a scene to then see it through to the end. One thing that bugged me slightly about it was that it was very clean image. It was HD like everything else is. It was like 4K, really clean image. And I was sort of thinking, if it's going to be like a complete horror sort of scene, should the image just be a little more filmized, or the frame rate drop slightly, or it be a little grainy, or but here's the problem with that. Then if you do that, would it then look like it was pre-recorded?
It's a good point. Here's my thought when I watch it. That's an excellent point. Do we go all the way with the look, with the gimmick, with the presentation when they show up? Well, they showed up on the environment of pro wrestling. So I believe the cameras, the resolution, the lack of any kind of film damage or horror type of effects, they were invading that environment. Then the next week, we saw all the things you just talked about. It was kind of a little less it was grainy. It went in from high quality to low quality and stuff like that. They went to the universe of WWE. Then the second week, they were within their own universe. That's what I'm hoping they're doing, that they can, and maybe they know with the Bray stuff. Remember, even with Kane sometimes, and then who was it? Sin Cara. Let's change the lighting. Let's put the red light. It doesn't work in an arena that way. So they kind of have to, there has to be a happy medium of this where they're in that universe where it's presented. Then when you take them out of the arena, they go to the cinematic broken universe type thing.
We're going to bring Bray Wyatt and the Fiend character specifically back. So we were talking about a bit of a disconnect as far as something that you can't relate to. Bray Wyatt, the character between the Firefly Funhouse, I always struggle saying that, and the Fiend, was two distinct characters, but neither are relatable. So really what you've got is essentially just a badass guy that you can't relate to on a personal level, but then kills everybody else, so you cheer him for that, even though he's meant to be a bad guy. So there's, as you say, there's contradictions in that sense. So how do the Wyatt Six get around that? So we've already said that Bo, at least one of the two portrayals, is himself pretty much. So at least that he's more relatable, and as you said, everyone's gone through a loss or more in their life, so they can relate to what Bo's going through. But also now we've got 5 Bray Wyatts, or Fiends almost. They're all wearing the masks. And how do you book that? Because if they lose, then they lose some of the luster. But if they just kill everybody, then why aren't they in the main events every week and winning every single match? So do you throw them in the ring right away and just kill people? Do you keep them off TV? Or keep them out of the ring and just do vignettes for so long? What's the best route to keep the gang fresh?
They have a lot of, if they do add a 6th member, they have an even bigger problem because you technically in wrestling, and I've been in this spot with, say, Raven and other acts, where I would do the job, meaning lose the match. I would get beat up more to protect Raven's character because it didn't hurt mine. You're going to have the other 4 or 5 people outside of Uncle Howdy always getting beat, or are they all going to be, pretty much immortal? Which means, like you said with Bray, if people are watching, and for people listening, I'm basically going across in a flat line. Bray was never more over by killing people anyway, because he was already basically immortal, right? He was just some kind of like I can't mythical person. Like he was not human, whether he was Bray Wyatt or the Fiend. So with these 5 or 6 people, what do? Hey, what I would do is, and this is where WWE, I believe they see the value in recouping their investment in downside guarantees, payoffs, whatever it might be, whatever these talents get paid. They do not see the return on the investment as what we saw with the vignettes, what we saw with the interview or the Wyatt Six debuting. They see recouping the value or the investment in how long your match is and how many bumps you take. The physicality aspect is how they see recouping the investment. Whereas with the Wyatt Six, I wouldn't even have them wrestle for as long as possible. And another idea, since this is kind of more of an adult-themed act. Put this in the 3rd hour every single time. Make the 3rd hour what Raw Underground back in the day and all that stuff was trying to do.
The
A
witching
more
hour.
adult Yeah, it could be the witching hour. The 3rd hour of Raw is like a completely different identity than the first 2 hours. It's your weakest hour anyway. What do you have to lose? And they're going to Netflix in 2025. That's the perfect place for the Wyatt Six to be that cinematic horror act. And taking bumps is not that's the problem. And Dutch probably said that. The bell rings, then it turns into a pro wrestling match, and now you're like, they're just they're just 6 more wrestlers. Doesn't mean anything. So I wouldn't have them in the ring at all. It would be more of these things for as long as possible.
Here's something. So we acknowledge now that Uncle Howdy is Bo Dallas. Do we then acknowledge Dexter Lumis, Joe Gacy, Eric Rowan, and Nikki Cross? Because if we acknowledge their previous characters within WWE, you could just look at Nikki Cross and go, oh, there's that girl who did that stupid superhero thing, and now she's just this for some reason. Or Eric Rowan. It's the vintner. Although at least Eric Rowan's got tenure within the Bray Wyatt group. It makes a lot of sense for him to be in. Or Dexter Lumis, who's just not been seen for a very long time. Although a lot of people are very high on him, and for whatever reason he was kept off TV for a long time. But do you acknowledge that these people are these people, or are they just now completely separate characters, like when Ricky Steamboat came back as the Dragon?
Well, think about it. The outfits they're wearing, especially a couple of them with that mask, you can't wrestle with that mask on. It's the buzzard thing, you're going to wrestle with that thing on? You can't wrestle with. What I would do is maybe start revealing them one by one and telling their story and how she was put in that stupid superhero gimmick, and kind of, for the smart marks, kind of bury Vince without saying Vince's name, that he was the one holding everybody back. So, you can have Dexter Lumis, you can have that. I think unmasking them, I don't know, voluntarily, or if it's in a match, the mask comes off. I'm not quite sure how you reveal them, but unmasking them could probably buy you another couple months of content. And he could actually, I thought about this, Bo Dallas and Uncle Howdy existing at the same time is going to be the same problem as Bray Wyatt and The Fiend. What if Uncle Howdy kills off Bo Dallas, kills off Nikki Cross, and she becomes Sister Abigail, kills off the characters that they previously were, but it's them without the mask on, but now their new name and what they have.
This is going to go back to Bray again. So from what you know, do you think that Bray Wyatt had creative leeway more than most of the people within the company to come up with his own stuff? Or do you think he was working with a writer? I think he was working with a writer within WWE.
Towards the end, that horror writer, which I believe that horror writer is working with these guys now.
Oh, right. So there at least is a continuation as far as thematically behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, but you could see right away on TV, even with the writer. And then that was the thing. I heard some backstage news that the writer had heat, that the writer was talking about his Emmys or whatever he won, and then he got heat. And it was like, you can't bring normal people into the wrestling business anyway. But at the same time, it's like, so I'm supposed to, this is wrestling, by the way. If you first come into a company, you're almost not allowed to perform to the abilities that you have. You have to give it 6 months, and you got to placate them. And then you got to go through all the stuff to, okay, I got this great idea, but how do I convince the office that it's their idea? And that could be, now with Bray was allowed to create all that stuff, but then once people see it, the Vince McMahons, the Bruce Pritchards, maybe the Michael Hayeses, who, we have trouble getting it at our age at some points, they don't get any of it. That's where Bray constantly, even with the Wyatt family, which, dude, they should have been as strong as possible for multiple years. And they were a relatable group of a cult. People understood it. People understood Cape Fear and all this other stuff that he touched on. But the minute he became a mythical, supernatural character and the office didn't understand how to protect it, you're done. How many resets did Bray have? It always started off strong, and then at some point, Some old man woke up one morning and says, I don't get it. And that was the end of it.
The Blair Witch Project.
The Blonde Bitch
Yeah.
Project, of course. Yeah.
We're going to go back to Bo Dallas a couple of times and what we saw this past Monday. And it's an uncomfortable segment. It's meant to be an uncomfortable segment. I mean, not just visually, but also with the things that they're talking about. And here's something that you said beforehand, and we've discussed this, is that Bray Wyatt is sort of like an updated Raven, except that Raven, as far out as he went with a point, always had a point. Whereas this last week, Bo Dallas said very little, but every single thing he said had a lot of weight to it. So now you know what he's going through. You can see his motivations immediately, and you can see the conflict and the real life and all that kind of thing. I don't know if this is the perfect time to bring up comparing Bray Wyatt to Raven in that sense, or even Bray Wyatt to Bo Dallas now, as far as getting a point across that anybody can understand it.
Yeah, there's a lot of concepts I think Bray had where they did mirror Raven. Let's just talk about it, like say Bray and Alexa Bliss. That was Raven, Tommy Buell, the love triangle from summer camp. The relation started, or the relatable characters started because everybody has friends from high school or summer camp that they were best friends with. They either kind of go their separate ways or you end up hating each other. It's very, a very easy story to understand. And of course, putting the girl in the middle who was with one and the other, and it's a whole bunch of back and forth that way. It's a soap opera. Even though Raven was kind of a little bit of a mythical character because he had a lot of mystique, but he was still a human being and he just looked like somebody that was completely different. Then you had Tommy Dreamer, who was an all-American boy. Then you put Beal in the middle. Then you bring guys like me and Meanie and other people into it, and it just spawned off a bunch of different things. That was the problem with Bray. Like you said, anybody that got too close to the sun didn't come out of it as good. That's why Seth Rollins, I think, even famously said that he didn't really want to work with him because it was hard to figure out how to do something with him. Brock, I think, too, had said he didn't want to work Bray Wyatt or The Fiend because what do you do? You know what I mean? How do you interact? So with that being said, I have an idea, too, how you can still keep Bray on TV, because your next point is probably going to be about, is this exploitation of Bray's death? But if you're a Star Wars fan, you'll understand this. You have enough Bray evergreen quotes and clips and just little catchphrases to have him speaking to Bo as a voice, like a, kind of floaty, kind of mystical kind of look.
Well, like
Bray.
A force ghost kind of thing. Are you thinking of?
Yeah, or something
would you even have his image out there? I mean, I'm not talking about like a photo or something. Would you bring him back as like some sort of 3D graphical entity? Yeah,
a hologram, possibly. Can you imagine?
Yeah,
I mean, it could be whatever, but the exploitation, and that's what we had talked about. If this was just a dude from NXT that they put in the Uncle Howdy thing, but this is about as real as it gets. This is his brother, their family, and he was with the act before Bray died. So it's not like they just created Uncle Howdy out of nowhere to kind of, let's see if they can replace the Fiend. They were an act before Bray passed away. So this is really a continuation of that.
Because, as you rightly said, I was going to bring up exploitation. And ultimately, it is exploiting a death for profit. I mean, there's no way of getting around that. That's just how it works. It's really, would Bray Wyatt or Wyndham Rotunda, the real person, give his blessing for that? And unlike other ones, I made a couple of mentions here in the script, like Randy Orton telling Rey Mysterio that Eddie Guerrero's not in heaven, he's in hell. Or the Paul Bearer thing with CM Punk and Undertaker. A lot of people who knew Paul Bearer, you included, said he would have got a huge kick out of being part of a WrestleMania main event after he died. But some of the fans didn't understand that. But I think most fans and most people in the industry as well can pretty much see that this is actually exactly what Wyndham would have wanted.
Yeah, I mean, any wrestler where you can pay tribute, and that's exactly what this is, a tribute to Wyndham Rotunda, Bray Wyatt, The Fiend, any kind of stuff with the act. And like I said, if this was a third party that had no relation to these people in this family, then I would say WWE is trying to recreate this. This is going to fail. But the way the people react, think about this. And I get a little bit of chills from it because imagine, like, I tell you, hey, by the way, their entrance theme as they go around and kill everybody or do whatever is just going to be one piano note that's played every 3 to 4 seconds on a cadence. The people, when they hear the piano music now, they pop for it. They know. And now as it's playing, it added so much atmosphere to that first week. Do you remember the it's a very uncomfortable cadence of the piano. It almost it makes you feel off put by it. Really good stuff, man. I like I said, that the attention to detail on Bray's side was immense. But then when you put it in the old guard's hands, it becomes what it always becomes. Crap.
We shall move on. And we're going to be talking about someone who's related to the old guard, but I don't think anyone would call him old guard. We're going to talk about Shane McMahon. So, Conrad Thompson spoke on Grilling JR a few days ago regarding the possibility of Shane McMahon jumping to AEW. Here's the quote. I know for sure that Shane McMahon has reached out to wrestlers on the AEW roster to at least hypothetically discuss the idea. Are we saying that it's going to happen? No. We are saying it's not that crazy of an idea. Jim Ross said it could happen and how he would be utilised as a character on television. That's what I'm talking about. It's viable. He's got great name identity. People recognise him. It's a long shot. I'd say less than 50-50 that he would re-engage with pro wrestling, but I can't say that it's impossible because it isn't. I don't think it's something we're unable to do. It depends on what he wants to do. Now, Dave Meltzer then followed up in the Wrestling Observer newsletter with, he has spoken with people high up on the food chain on both sides. He wrote that some noted that they never heard anything about Shane McMahon's alleged desire to join AEW. And additionally, Meltzer cited Tony Khan as saying, I've never met him or talked to him in my life. But also, as of yesterday evening, Tony Khan was asked about this, and I can't even find the quote for it, but it was something along the lines of Shane McMahon is always welcome in AEW. So he's already saying that, hey, could happen. But Shane McMahon in AEW, if that was ever going to be a possibility, would the AEW fans accept it? Because AEW was in fact created to be an alternative to WWE, and then you're bringing in someone who there's almost no one more affiliated, associated with WWE than Shane McMahon.
Well, I mean, that horse has already left the barn, James. How many ex-WWE guys? You have more WWE guys than AEW guys in the company right now. It's essentially WWE light. That's why they've always done that comparison to WCW during that time when they were signing a lot of WWF guys at the time. But getting into the Shane stuff, this would be awesome. This would be absolutely awesome for AEW. Because I think Shane, with the smart marks and the hardcore fans, they have a respect for Shane that they don't have for Vince or Stephanie or even Triple H. Shane puts his body on the line. Shane puts his life on the line. Shane did the style that identifies with what the AEW fans, I think, really like. And Shane is he's a charismatic guy. He's a guy that identifies with fans. There's that video I talked about where I think he's at the Mets or the Yankees game, and he's coming through. He has a beer in his hand. People are cheering. He's putting a hand up, doing the Shane McMahon, like the hand signs. And he's about the most fan-friendly McMahon that I know of. And he is kind of one of the boys because he wrestles, he loves UFC, he loves MMA, he loves competition and getting physical. He would be an excellent addition to AEW. And this could be, quite frankly, remember, we're going to talk about in the future episode about, I was there in Cleveland during the simulcast with WCW Nitro and WWE Raw when Vince had announced he bought the company. So we're going to cover that in a future segment on a future episode. But this can be, once again, that promo done the right way, Shane McMahon being an authority figure in AEW and given the appearance that he's working or owning part of AEW to compete with his father's old company. There's a lot of storylines here that you can go babyface authority figure, which you should do right off the bat. He'll get a pop. But then if the fans start to get tired of him, now his dad has sent him to AEW to destroy it. And I would go as far as to say, try to get Vince. That would be nuts. You talk about a guy who has a chip on his shoulder right now. Don't think because he's 77, 78 years old and he walks with a cane and he has a villain mustache that this dude doesn't like miss the fight. You know, for basically he's fighting now for a lot of different things in court and legal stuff, but he still has it in him to want to. Man, hey, I just think about that. I mean, and that's really Shane's an outlier. The percentage of probably I would say between 10 and 30% of what happened. Vince between 1 to 8%, but it's still a kind of cool fantasy booking. What do you think?
Well, I don't think they'll. If nothing else, if Vince McMahon turned up on AEW TV, one, it'd be a huge news story, of course. Two, I think a lot of advertisers would drop AEW. Because the dude, because Vince McMahon is accused of sex trafficking and rape. You can't have him on TV. Even they're not proved in a court of law yet. If it gets to criminal court or it's found in Janelle Grant's favour, you can't have him on TV because people will be amazed. In fact, I think there's enough people out there who won't care to the point that they will tune in. But I think a lot of the AEW faithful will just, out of protest, genuinely not watch. And this isn't like a Twitter, oh, I'm never watching again because Chris Jericho's on. I'm talking, I think they would never watch the product again if they let Vince on. Shane, on the other hand, would be more interesting. But Vince, no, I can never see that happening. I don't think Tony Khan would risk that.
You have a great point there. And, you know, sometimes in the wrestling bubble, people think in terms of like concepts and theories, but in real life, it could really hurt the company. Now, you know, the WBD, Warner Brothers Discovery, they might not care. They might just want the ratings. And we're at a point now, we're going to talk about AEW, I believe, next week on episode 2 about the ratings. They're at a point now where, much like Vince, when he was fighting for basically the company's life, had to do the Attitude Era, had to go and test the USA Network, who had sent letters, which DX famously read the letter of what they couldn't do on TV. That was a real letter they read from USA. So now here's another thing. Maybe months down the line, just an idea, free idea. Shane is on the phone talking to somebody and just goes, all right, Pop, thanks. Love you too. It's like, wait a minute. That alone would get people talking, right?
Mm. How would you actually book in Shane then? Would you think he was a good guy or a bad guy? Because he's a McMahon, and the AEW people, the fans, are Tony Khan supporters, by and large, I'm sure. So, I mean, surely he's got to then be aligned with the Young Bucks, let's say. And then he is, you know, now a shareholder of the company. He's now an EVP. Somehow, it's wrestling. You can make up these business things. Somehow they've transferred their power over to Shane, and then it becomes like a two. But then who's on the good guy side? Because I think we talked about this not too long ago. If we're going to recreate, as we say, you know, a heel promoter on-screen character, Eric Bischoff did it fantastically. He doesn't get enough credit for being that in the 90s. Vince McMahon did it even better. He's the best who's ever done it. He may still be the greatest heel of all time. It's barely
we know why
arguable.
now.
Yeah, definitely right at the moment.
Now.
And to women everywhere. And but then who's the Austin? Who's the Austin to Shane's Vince, if he's going to be the Vince in this situation?
You leave that up to the roster to decide for themselves who wants to step up. It's a way, an unspoken way of saying, like, everybody step up now. Everybody put their best foot forward, their best performance. Let's see what character aligns. And he being there and the potential of working an angle like that, and that Austin McMahon angle, if you can recreate that in AEW, where the boss and the employee are at odds, which is basically anybody that works for anybody else, has that. That's why it's still so identifiable. And that's why the Mr. McMahon character was the greatest heel of all time, because every single person that's ever worked in their life and had any job understands that. Like you Dutch talks famously about how they can relate. That is the most relatable thing for anybody that goes into work every day. And when Austin was beating Vince's ass every week, or even when Vince was getting over on Austin, the people that go to those jobs, they hate their boss. Man, they're so invested. They just want to live vicariously through Austin. So your question is, Who is that person? Well, you said off camera, it could be John Moxley, that he is kind of the rebel of the group. I would love to see somebody else step up and maybe be that person where they get elevated because John Moxley's already been elevated a bunch. Who would you see? I'm trying to think about the roster. I'm not quite sure. And that's the tough decision. But get Shane in there and then let's figure it out.
Well, the thing is, really, is that anyone who's remotely got any star power in the company, for the most part, are in the 40s or in the late 30s. I mean, really, you want someone younger to elevate.
I know who it is.
Oh,
I just thought about it.
Go on.
MJF.
Yeah, 20s still. Angry.
Because he can verbally hang with Shane and he can dress him down. Nobody tells him what to do. Shane can bring out we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
People will identify with that right away. MJF's got to be the guy. And if he doesn't have the belt right now, there's your storyline that's in the main event that means just as much, if not more, than any world title.
Well, do you know who he's going to be wrestling at AEW? I hope I get the name right. MJF, and I believe it's Daniel Garcia. Yeah, it's Daniel Garcia. And it's like, MJF was the champion.
The dancing kid?
He dances?
Yeah, he does the dance. Like when Tony Khan was doing that dance after Moxley got dropped on his head. He was dancing with Daniel Garcia.
I will have to defer to you on that one. So basically the dancing guy after an injury.
All right, your homework is to watch every compilation of Daniel Garcia doing his dance.
So, okay, so Daniel Garcia, the dancing guy, and MJF is going to be one of the matches, we believe, All In, because they did an interview. That was the first segment, and I was like...
Hey, by the way, is it All In or All Out at Wembley?
I figured out it was All In. I see, I told the story off air, right, to Stevie. I talked to someone within AEW, and I was relaying, I was at All Wembley. Is it All In or All Out? And the person at the other end went, I don't know either. And there's a prominent person within AEW, and they couldn't remember if it was All In or All Out because they've for some reason they've made two pay-per-views within 2 weeks of each other, almost the exact same name. So they haven't given
that's right.
that identity.
Chicago was All Out, right?
So that's
Chicago
All Out.
was like a week later after Wembley.
Something else, right? This is not an AEW bashing episode, I must say, but they've got a card right in Cardiff, a show in Cardiff, Wales, right? Like the day or 2 days before or something before Wembley. Not one single mention on TV about it. It's almost like on the down low, like so they're trying not to sell tickets to that or take any shine off the Wembley show, which they've already sold like 40,000 tickets to Wembley, something like that. So it's still, a profitable show for them, but they're now not promoting Cardiff like they should be. It's just bizarre. Why even book it?
Why even book it on this way? Why would you have your talents working that show and possibly get injured? You can just do a fan access week like WWE does for WrestleMania. I never understood that. WWE does that too. And we can feature episode while you're running a house show the night before a pay-per-view or even a SmackDown before a pay-per-view where you have somebody wrestling on the pay-per-view and they go 50-50 for 20 minutes, and you're wearing them down. It's incredibly difficult to perform like that 2 nights in a row.
Where were we before? Before we get off Shane too much, we've got to bring up some other stuff as well. So would you have him wrestle? Because, the last time you saw him in a ring, he did one leap. You covered this on the Wrestling Analysis channel. He did one leapfrog or 2 leapfrogs, and his leg just turned into, a Mr. Man reference, Mr. Tickle's arm. He went, and he just seemed to just melt onto the canvas, and that's the last time we've seen him. So
I've never heard it referred. I'm sorry. That's one of those things. You got me with that one.
Sorry, I just thought that. So he basically just sort of just melted into powder, or melted into jelly.
It's not going to go. I just picture melting in there. I've never heard such a metaphor in my life.
He did. He just melted onto the floor like the witch.
It became a meme too, where they green screened them on other scenes in skateboard parks. And, I make fun of me when I get hurt too, because I make fun of myself for it. So we're not making fun of Shane, but it's just awful. Yeah, you're right. And that's where we can get into that with Punk on a future episode, because how injury prone is Punk? I was somebody that got injured quite a bit. And now at 52, it's like, if I got back in the ring, I probably could go through a match and wrestle, but what's the next week or 2 after that gonna look like?
Mm.
So even if he comes out of it uninjured, what's the recovery time? Shane, though, like I said, just like we're talking about Billy Gunn, Too Cold Scorpio, other people, he does have a natural ability and a toughness and a durability where these freak accidents can happen. But I would make that Shane McMahon match could only be one place for one match, and that's Wembley. If you really want to fill it up, you put him against MJF.
I think that wouldn't be a bad idea as well. I know this for a fact, but I'm going to ask it as a question. Have you ever wrestled Shane McMahon, or worked with him in the ring at least?
I used to train Shane at times for matches. The time where we did the most consistent training, myself and Dreamer, was when he was preparing to wrestle Shawn Michaels at Saturday night's main event, which was an excellent match, really good stuff. And the thing with Shane, though, is Shane's such a fan and a lover of MMA. Our first hour of training was MMA training. Chokeouts, submissions, not anything that can condition you for a pro wrestling match or running the ropes or taking bumps or anything. And it was some of the toughest training. As a matter of fact, he would do a lot of chokes and stuff, and I'm not proficient. I got into pro wrestling. If I was an MMA fighter, I'd do that. But the repeated chokes and everything ended up with me having to get my vocal implant replaced from so many times. And I remember Shane was actually unhappy with me because Vince asked, why are you injured? And I told him, I was just training with Shane. I was trying to play it down. Yeah, I just kind of got caught with a choke or whatever. And I guess Vince got mad at him, and Shane never talked to me after that. We were quite friendly, me, him, and Dreamer, for a few years. So that bothered me, but I wasn't burying him. I was just like telling Vince exactly what happened because they were going to pay for my surgery. So it's like I have to tell him. So yeah, I hope me and Shane or Shane and I can reconnect somewhere down the road because he is a really decent dude. He is a really good dude to talk to. And I feel like that kind of misunderstanding kind of got us kind of crossed right there.
How were his punches?
Oh, they were exactly what they looked like. They felt exactly what they looked like. And what you said off camera, like it's either he potatoes you so bad that you can't sell or he misses. I would take the misses out because everyone connected with me. And I would say this too. Here's your clickbait. Here's your clickbait title. The McMahons are the worst wrestlers in wrestling history. Now, hear me out. They have no fundamentals. They got two left feet, especially Vince. He's a clod. They have no coordination when it comes to the pro wrestling thing. Shane is a legitimate athlete. He can grapple. He can do all the shoot stuff, but it's not worked wrestling in that way. But they are, all of them, including Stephanie and Triple H, because it's all the family, are the best workers ever in wrestling history. The promos, the presentation, the characters, and then when it comes time to physically perform, especially when they have to get their receipt, the payoff, everybody but Stephanie, which I know you were going to say that, everybody but Stephanie gets their just desserts. Stephanie, the heat I had with her, the problem with her character, she'd slap the hell out of everybody. And nobody ever like dumped her in a, Henry Godwin's like pig pen or something like that and embarrassed her. I think
they did originally.
Only one of the Bellas slapped her, and that was it. That was about it, right?
She was boinged off the ring apron once when someone like ran into the ropes or something. I don't know. I think that was about it. This is in the later one in the 2010s.
Hunter did it as an accident. I think it was WrestleMania against Ronda and Kurt, right?
Yeah. But
I think
in the 2000s, in like 2000, 2001, she, like with Chris Jericho especially, she would take so much abuse, it was unbelievable. And then for some reason in the 2010s, she was untouchable. And the other thing with Stephanie is that she always emasculated, without consequence, everyone she talked to. And another thing that I always thought was really counterproductive with Stephanie, I know we're talking about Shane, was she would always say, "I'll fire you and you'll end up on the breadline." It was like, that's bearing your own company, saying that you don't pay these people anything or you can't afford to. Whereas in the reality, the people who you're emasculating for the most part are probably multi-millionaires anyway. But you're telling people that, you know what I mean? There's a weird disconnect with with what you're threatening people. It's like, okay, well, I'll just retire because I'm a multimillionaire kind of thing.
We did I gotta send it to you. We did actually an unaired BWO WWE Network takeover special that I have the footage of. I'm
Okay.
saving it for the special occasion. But remember the Slam City stop motion claymation type thing, like a Gumby thing, where every single wrestler had a job outside of wrestling. And I made the joke, which was like passing. I was like, "Oh, this is a show where everybody acts like indie wrestlers, and they got jobs when they're not wrestling." But that's it. Yeah. And Stephanie, that's why we're talking about Shane, but that's why Shane is the best one out of all of them for the AEW, potential, return to wrestling, because he is selfless to a degree, especially physically in the ring. He will give his body up for an MJF or an opponent, but also you can get a good six to 12 months as a pure babyface Shane McMahon until the people turn on him. I think I think his path would be exactly what Cody's was when he was in AEW with the heel turn afterwards that Cody never did.
Well, you sort of said something there, is for some reason with AEW, it seems to bring out the risk taker in everybody, from Sting
Oh
to
God.
Adam
Yeah.
Copeland, kind of thing. I mean, what's Shane gonna, I mean, the risks he took in WWF and WWE. I mean, my goodness. I mean, we're thinking of the one where, he falls like 40, 50 feet and backwards. He was onto like a big waterbed kind of thing. But still, I mean, that's terrifying.
We talked about that. When you have that, and we're going to talk about the Jacob Fatu splash. If you have a mat or a mattress or crash pad under a solid wood table, you're still going to feel it. Put it on top. That's different. Underneath, no different. You're actually messing things up, I think, that way. But here's the thing. I think Shane McMahon would walk in the Wembley Stadium and see that huge box truss that's like 8 stories high and go, I'm dropping an elbow off that. That's Shane McMahon.
Do you think... I'll get off Shane in a minute, but hey, this is deep dives on everything, I'm sorry to tell you, but this is how it's going to be. We're going to be just really exploring everything. Very briefly as well is the Brock Lesnar story. So he gets fired from WWE after, and correct me if I'm wrong here, he wanted to basically kill everyone in the Royal Rumble and then go toe-to-toe with Brock Lesnar. I mean, keep in mind that Shane is, he's someone who goes bright red just walking to the ring. So I don't know if it's like some sort of breathing difficulty he has, or he's a bit out of shape. I mean, he can do wrestling matches, but he always seems to like blow up like immediately. And then he's also, at the time he was nearly 50, and he wanted to go toe to toe with Brock Lesnar. It strikes me as Shane is someone that really shouldn't be booking himself.
Well, what I heard was, I didn't hear those kinds of details, but I heard he wanted to go over in that Rumble. I think was it Minute Maid Stadium, that Rumble?
Was it 2022 or 2021?
I believe one of the first Rumbles, or the first one to come back with a lot of people in a stadium. Not sure. Anyway, with that being said, I think Shane was just trying to shoot his shot right there to see if he can. There was a lot of dissension in that company at that time with Vince, and Shane was back, and there was other people trying to. And Vince was this right after, or was this just before he got ousted for the first time, when he got voted out?
I'm just looking at the Royal Rumble matches, so it was 2022, so it was one of the ones that he came back from. And then he got fired, and then it was revealed afterwards it was $900,000 a year.
If Vince released his own son,
yeah,
they did. Tony Khan, you got a gold mine with Shane McMahon. Pay this guy whatever he can. You can pay him, or he might just come in to rewrite his legacy. Whatever incentive or salary or money you give Shane will be the most worthwhile investment to get people talking about AEW, to get the network executives to say, wow, you got Shane Imagine Warner Bros. Discovery is kind of on the fence with AEW right now, especially with the ratings. I think they cut their licensing fees and all that stuff. I really do believe if they see that, they'll mark out and go, we got a McMahon. And Tony can say, just give me a year to 18 months with Shane and to turn this thing around. I think it could be a really great investment. And I'm going to talk about it maybe next week about the things that I can do as far as ideas. I'm not talking about going to aid, but the ideas we're going to share can help organize and change AEW's identity as a company in all three shows in 1 week. 1 week. You can sort it all out, and it would have been, oh, here's a name just offhand. I said it when we were talking off camera. This would have been the opportunity with Shane coming into AEW as an authority figure that eventually turns into a heel. Punk. Punk would have been the guy. MJF is a close second, but Punk would have been that guy.
So, next on the agenda, we're going to be doing the whiteboard, the wrestling analysis, what went right, what went wrong. And this week, as we're going to be doing every week with the whiteboard analysis, it won't be going away, it's going to be a weekly feature. And this week, we're going to be doing Jacob Fatu's debut on WWE SmackDown. Take it away, Stevie.
Jacob Fatu, we're going to play this just in real time, real quick here. Boom, spear Randy through there. And you can see that the barrier didn't break all the way, but to me, that adds to the realism. So when he hits them, spears them, and we're going to see with the table, these things right here, as we bring out the annotation, these things right here with the sections come off. They don't have brand new barriers or tables or anything. They are collapsible pieces of furniture or items that are around ringside. Their budget would be incredible if they did that. So it gets kind of disjointed right here, but it's a solid way. Now, what I want to talk about too is we have a camera guy here, we have one off here, and we have one right here where he speared him. So this guy caught him here. And as he's running, this guy can catch him maybe, but this guy over Randy Orton's shoulder is really the money shot when it comes to this and makes it look like it's extremely violent. This guy right here is very brave because what if they popped right through the barrier, James? And I mean, it would look great on TV, but this is like a $40,000, $50,000 camera. So you don't want to get any heat for doing that. But let's play this forward a little bit more. And this is where we look at Jacob and he has a really intense look on his face, but he's finding the camera. And this is where he does his big scream a couple times. You can see it right there. This is where I think it was overdone, but you had a different theory, James, about why he kept firing up and getting in front of the camera.
Well, we discussed this when we were doing this beforehand, and I said, do you think he's overdoing the screaming and finding the camera just so they'll have B-roll for Raw and next Friday SmackDown, just so they've got vignettes already in the pipeline, in the can, and actually have enough usable footage to make them interesting?
I 100% agree. I think you're right about that because that's what happens a lot of times, that you have B-roll packages, vignettes, pay-per-view packages, pre-match packages. So for his first match, I have no doubt that all these intense roars and shouts and everything and the look in his eyes are all strictly for B-roll, for packages. But in the context of real time, I didn't like it because it felt like that indie wrestler that always fires up after every move. Doesn't make anything special. So there's something else I really disagree with right here as we go forward. You can see him getting into the ring. And this is where this is the one weak point in this entire segment. Cody firing up, clotheslining him, and then he grabs him. So two things are wrong about this. First thing is Cody's on his feet fighting. People could say, well, he's world champion, of course, but you have Solo in the corner right here that can take, Cody peppering him and then turns around and Jacob takes him out. He could literally beat him up in the corner and then come over here to the apron and then get pulled out. What are your thoughts about that? That the fact that Cody was selling the beating and then got up and temporarily fought back on Jacob.
Would you have even have Cody and Jacob touch?
Yeah, you kind of have to because Cody is the main baby face that the bloodline is trying to take out.
I'm just wondering, it's one of those things where if you have Cody and Jacob, maybe they just meet face to face or eye to eye, and then Solo takes him out, and then that could build up to eventually in weeks or months' time when Jacob and Cody finally get physical in that kind of respect? Or do you think it just needs to be that impactful of a debut that Jacob just needs to kill everybody and nobody gets an attack on him?
Yes, yes, but this particular spot is the disconnect in that. He should have just 100% nobody. This is one of those things where how long was it before Solo got touched? It wasn't long enough to where he got beat down or he sold for somebody, but this dude needed at least 4, 6, 8 weeks of nobody getting any offense on him or doing anything. It's kind of like Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker came out and speared people when the bell rang. Now he's 50-50 with Sheamus, with Kaiser. It just loses that intensity. Well, here's an example. What if Goldberg won his first 5 matches and then won 50-50 for the next 100? He wouldn't be Goldberg, right?
Mm-hmm. So you think straight away that with Jacob, he's now found his level? Because he just went even briefly 50-50 with Cody.
No, because people will forget about that because the splash and everything else will stand out. The B-roll, they'll never show this part of this attack ever again. But if you do that over and over again with Jacob in every situation, now he's the guy that you can fire up on. And then Cody's on his feet. He was beat down by the Bloodline before this, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So what's their beat down mean? These are the things you gotta like really pick apart, split hairs in order. I'm not downing him. I want to protect the talent so they mean the most. That's where I see that. So, but basically he just pulls him out. And this move here is really good. Rock bottom right on the apron. Really well done. Great sell by Cody. And it makes sense because he pulled him out. But like I said, if he was firing up on Solo and back here on the ropes, and then Jacob pulled him out to prevent him from beating on Solo more, that would be a way to punch that up. So the next thing we're going to go to right here, once again, firing up. I see your point about that. And here he goes with the table and everything. Hey, by the way, just a quick point. I want to congratulate Corey Graves on being the newest member of the Bloodline. You know why? You know why?
Tell me.
So you tell everybody, James. I think it's hilarious.
Oh, because he started clearing off the table for Jacob.
I love it. I love it. Honorary Samoan.
Well,
Corey Graves.
I mean,
awesome.
that's a real trope for years when someone would put someone through a table. I mean, it made no sense that he'd always get rid of the monitors. It's like, don't you want to hit them? Don't you want to land them on the edge of the monitor to do maximum damage? But it's one of those slight disconnects where obviously you've actually got to look after the person you're trying to kill. It's
sort of like when Scorpio stabbed that dude. He put a mattress under him first, so he was nice and comfortable I don't mean to make light of it, but it's right. You're talking about, I want to destroy this guy, but man, let's make sure he has a clean table to bump. Hey, that's pro wrestling. Speaking of which, you might say something about this in pro wrestling, all being fake or whatever. When you're up here on the top rope, when you're up in this position, and we're going to talk about this. I got the lethal lockdown where I climbed to the top of the cage. We're going to examine that. And when you can see the people here and here when you stand up, or you can be anywhere near looking slightly up and you see the box truss, you're like, I'm pretty high up. It's very, very, how can I put it? You just think it's not that high when you're on the top rope, much less the top of the cage. But now you're on the top rope, and you're going to splash somebody onto a table that somebody in production assumes, hey, if I put a mat under this, they aren't going to feel it. No, it's not true. I'm not calling you out, James. I have them on the teleprompter. But here's the splash here. And you were talking to Cody, said he broke a couple ribs on this, right?
Well, he said that at the end of a house show like a day or two later. So we don't know if it's real or not, but I mean, do you think that's real?
I don't think it's real because he probably is pretty sore, but I bet you Jacob bounced off that table. It looks like he took the brunt of it more. You know what I'm impressed by? I'm going to show this now that we can scrub frame by frame. Every single Samoan has the same style splash, which is a great thing. But the arms stretched, it's like, you know what it is? They're literally doing the Superfly Snuka Splash. Like they all with their arms and legs, and this is me being a nerd. Look at how they just arms out and they come around in a circle to be closed in and then over Cody. It's just amazing that they just have, I mean, they're pretty much the largest wrestling family ever in history that have the most amount of workers that are all great workers. You know, whether you talk about Jacob Solo, Roman Reigns, Usos, even guys like Lloyd, who I know in the Anoa'i family, that just they have a natural ability to just be incredible pro wrestlers. But here's the thing, too. They're big dudes. They're all big dudes. Yokozuna, anybody, light as a feather. Absolutely light as a feather. For being as big as they all are just some of the lightest workers. Rikishi, the list goes on and on. Haku, everybody in the Samoan dynasty. It's not just a family; it's a dynasty stretching out generations. They are the best. I'd said the McMahons are the best workers in wrestling history. The whole package. Technically, the wrestlers that nobody can ever touch, the workers nobody can ever touch are the Samoans. They are The Rock too, obviously. They're incredible. Can't be touched.
I'm looking at the family tree now. I mean, before I even clicked on it, I was actually thinking Black Pearl as well. There's another Samoan who I don't think did too much in the way of like the big time. But there are so many, even like Gary Albright, who married into the family. I'd say L.A. Smooth, Manu, Samu, Tonga Kid. There's so many.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to get a number maybe for a future episode, or even if anybody can comment on this clip and video, let us know how many members of the Samoans actually wrestle. I would say we're talking 40, 50 over the course of time, minimum.
It's funny.
We're gonna get to Sika. Yeah, I mean, often Sika, Peter Maivia. I mean, there's a ton.
It's I don't know what I was going to say then. I'll move on. MLW stuff. So for people who haven't seen Jacob Fatu in action before, he came into WWE a lot slimmer. He looks in great shape. In MLW, he was north of 300 pounds. But man, we were talking about Scorpio beforehand. The many things we were talking about Scorpio beforehand, but one of them was, man, could that dude fly? And he didn't look like he was built for it. That's Jacob Fatu, but even more so. But he was incredibly agile.
What was his nickname in MLW? Because I hope it carries over. What was the Samoan werewolf? That's a cool name.
He was known as Samoan werewolf.
I believe someone called him that on commentary. I don't think he's ever referred to himself. I'm not sure. I got to catch up on MLW, but Jacob Fatu, definitely one of the bright spots in MLW. If you've never seen it or you do watch it, you know what I'm talking about. He's definitely a dude that the only problem is, are we entering into NWO territory with so many members of the bloodline?
Maybe.
And the faction being split because Roman's not there?
But here's the thing. Well, Roman's not there. That's probably a good thing. So not everybody's getting overshadowed by Roman. But the fact is, the NWO had, 45 members or something, not including NWO Japan. And I catalogued all of them for a video that I'll probably never end up doing. And there's so many of them that had no reason to be there. IRS. He wasn't IRS, but Mike Rotunda. He had no reason to be in that group. Some stock car racer who's technically a full member. Horace Hogan. I mean, yeah, he was Hulk Hogan's nephew, but Stevie Ray. I know the idea. Brian Adams. I'm picking some random names here, but there were so many of them who really, if it's going to be an elite unit, and then you're just adding in these like mid-carders from WWF, and that's what one of the main criticisms of the NWO. Whereas the Bloodline, name one person in the Bloodline who doesn't belong, who can't carry the weight.
Well, it helps when they're all family. That's the relay. You talk about the Dutch thing. The theme is relatability. They're family. You can relate to that. And also, the more of that's where the Jacob thing, I kind of was like hypersensitive to him firing up like the old wild Samoans, like the savage Samoans, which they used to be presented as. Now they're presented as basically a Samoan mafia. That's the difference. They're family in blood, but they're also family when it comes to business. So people watch Sopranos, Godfather, all that kind of stuff. They relate to that. So that's why they're over in a way too. They take a lot of tropes from the mafia movies and TV shows.
Do you know who they remind me of? And it's an updated version of the Hart Foundation, because they were all
Oh,
family.
that's good.
And then obviously
Yeah.
you had Brian Pillman there as well, but he wasn't familial connection, but he trained with them and he broke in at Stampede. But it's sort of like that, it's almost a blood in, blood out kind of thing. But
No, it's an excellent analogy. I didn't even think of that, but they're definitely, and there's something to be said for that type of stuff. And I'm glad, once again, with Vince McMahon, there would be a quota on the number of Samoans and other things presented on TV. And I understand when Vince says it's a little confusing, but at the same time, this is all real. They're all really family. Wouldn't you always want to bring your family in? And now there was some kind of art. I think it was just somebody putting together like fan art that said that it had Roman Reigns and part of the bloodline, and then it had The Rock and part of another bloodline at Survivor Series. That would be incredibly interesting.
yeah. It reminds me of back in 2000, Rikishi turns heel. He's doing a promo with The Rock. He ran over Steve Austin, which is stupid. It was a stupid storyline. It didn't do anything for Rikishi, especially when Triple H beat him clean a couple of months later, I'm sure, or whatever. But it was Rikishi ran over Steve Austin. He did it for The Rock because the Island Boys weren't getting enough attention or they weren't getting enough breaks. What was he talking about? The Samoans have got break after break. If you're a Samoan, you're almost guaranteed a great run in WWE. And he was like, all these champions, there are no champions of colour. It's like, wasn't Yokozuna, your own cousin, the champion for a year in 93, 94? And then there's Pedro Morales and whatever you describe as non-white, I suppose, in America.
Yeah, but Rikishi was a heel. So he doesn't have to say anything that necessarily makes. I'm just saying that's the creative liberty, pal, as Vince would say. But yeah, and he took a scary bump, dude. One of the scariest bumps off the Hell in a Cell with Taker onto that pickup truck. There wasn't a whole lot of room for error. His head could have hit that wooden like fence thing that was around it, I believe. Could have hit he could have overshot, undershot. It was very, very dangerous.
Do you know who did the test drop for that earlier in the day?
Who's that?
Shane McMahon.
One of the McMahons.
Yeah.
I mean, they're famous for doing that. Vince did the WrestleMania 12 zip line with Shawn. You got to give it I remember the Gronkowski one where Vince, for the WrestleMania at the Performance Center, he fell backwards and then he's just like, to here, kind of like the belt squat. Hey, pal, here. But Gronkowski was smart. Like, you know what I mean? You're doing that, Vince takes the bump, and that was it.
We're going to go back to the video and the debut. So this also goes to what we talked about on WSI with the Adam Copeland Edge jump off the cage kind of thing. And it's sort of a similar distance, really, from the top rope to the floor, essentially, instead of, a table to then the floor. You're up there, you're looking from where your eyes are, like 15, 16, 17 feet. I know you weren't the biggest high flyer back in the day. I know you're afraid of heights. But on the times that you have got on the top rope or you're up on a cage or something like that and you're about to do a dive or do a fall, is it prudent of you to look where you're going, or can it put you off looking at the crowd? Can it sort of disorientate you, looking at the crowd cheering or whatever, and distract you from, the perfect dive that you need to do to stay safe?
That's a very hard question. I guess when you're up there, kind of like with Adam, we talked about it during our interview. You're up there, you're looking around, and I'm here, I gotta go. I can't. And then that pause if I don't wanna, what if I overshoot the splash like we talked about and do the Eddie Guerrero when they debuted the Radicals in WWE and had dislocated his elbow. Adam went the other way and he could have blew both his knees out, although he broke his tibia, which is really, really bad. When you're up there, you go, or you just don't go at all. That's what I learned as time went on. Now, that doesn't mean I never got on the top rope to do something, done it myself, took a Frankensteiner or a superplex, set it up to where I was going to do something. Of course, if you never hit anything, you're in Flair territory with everything, and never hitting the what you call the flip up and doing the thing. But yeah, you got to be got to be careful. Wrestling is all about playing up to your strengths and hiding every weakness you can. If you're not good from the top rope, in this day and age, there's plenty that are anyway. So how are you going to stand out and be special anyway? Unless you Shane McMahon has already done it. That's why I think going back to the Adam thing, and people, if you watch, we did our initial whiteboard with the injury in our interview. It didn't make him any more over to even do that. He could have lit the table on fire in the corner and speared him through the table, and it would have been just as hardcore and devastating to me.
And then people would have remembered Gangrel coming out more.
Anyway, it was a gloss over no matter what way you look at it. Yes.
One more thing, and this will segue into our final story about Sika. Do you think you can do a Samoan Savage gimmick in 2024? You know how racially sensitive everybody is. I'm not. But you know how racially sensitive most people are in 2024. Can you do a character like that and it not come over as antiquated?
Well, I mean, Jacob is kind of that savage right now. The Tonga twins, Haku's kids, they're kind of savages and street fighters. These are the kind of, and remember, we still got a few more on the indies. This might not be over. There might be more Samoans coming, and I hope so, because guys like Lloyd and other people that I've known for decades that have been on the indies and waiting for that big break, they deserve it. They do. You say, well, they're like Samoans get like a really great run in WWE, but dude, they're put through the ringer. They're trained at the wrestling school. They work the indies. I'm sure they set the ring up. They break it down. In the case of Roman Reigns, he went to college and played football. These guys have paid their dues and matured to a certain extent, so they deserve the opportunity. But as far as that, you're talking about like, with the spears and the fish in their mouth type of savage, like it's so over the top.
Yeah, maybe that probably wouldn't fly, I imagine. But I mean, can you have something like struggling with English and only be guttural and growling and, not do a promo, I guess, in that sense?
Okay, but I'll bring this point up to you. They don't do it in a way of like right on the nose, but Jinder's tag team, there's a thing with these big monstrous guys that they have to act like Vince McMahon, king of the jungle. You know what I mean? It's like a National Geographic thing when I've seen him describe it. He could narrate the Wild Kingdom because he's a big fan of that kind of stuff. And I believe they do that. They made those two guys into savages. They had no layers of character or personality. They weren't even fighter. They were just brah, every time they did something, right? That can be a little short for you there, a little kiff. But I swear I didn't just stroke out. My mouth made that thing. But no, you shouldn't do it either, because this dynasty has evolved. The Samoan family has evolved. They're way beyond that. If you do that, you're going way, way far back a bunch of steps. And there'd be a disconnect because your family, did you keep this guy in a basement all his life or an attic? That thing. And now if you did that, then now we have another kind of Bray Wyatt story, I guess.
Yeah, I think Roman Reigns is the antithesis of like the old Samoan. I mean, like you can tell Roman Reigns conditions his hair and he's well groomed. He's like a modern, almost metrosexual gentleman that's so far away from the Samoan portrayals of the 70s and 80s, and even beforehand, because we're going to be talking about
He's the only dude I know that's never been made fun of for a man bun. So that tells you how cool he is.
Yeah, and also it tells you that you might get a smack in the face if you do make fun of it for him. So he's got the badass thing going as well. So I think he's very much got the right mix of both, sort of like a modern version of his father, in fact, who we're going to talk about now, Sika. So, announced a couple of days ago as we record this by his nephew Joe Anoa'i on Instagram, the father of Roman Reigns and the late Matthew Anoa'i, best known as Rosie in WWE, uncle to many, including Yokozuna and Samu and Tonga Kid and Umaga and Rikishi, has died on the June 25th at the age of 79. So, as the story goes, he and Afa got into the wrestling business because they kept rushing the ring as fans when Peter Maivia lost back in the San Francisco Roy Shire territory. And the heels were getting their asses kicked by them, and they were getting rather upset, and it was becoming very, very dangerous. And apparently they would even change the main events that, like, the world title match, let's say, would go on second to last, and then if Peter Maivia was losing, that would go on last, because by then the show's over. Let's just get out of here and leave the riot to settle itself down. It won't interrupt the show, that kind of thing. And then they were trained, and then they were sent to Stampede, and then they were sent to Pensacola and the WWF and that kind of thing. And they had a great run as a tag team. And Sika also had a pretty good run as a singles as well in the 80s. He even got Saturday night's main event with Hulk Hogan for the WWF title, and was one of his perennial challengers. And one of my favourite acts that never gets talked about is Sika with the Wizard. And do you remember who the Wizard was as the manager?
The Graham Wizard or
No,
High Chief? No, the Curtis Iakea.
Curtis Iakea. Great manager as well, but they were a fun act in the 80s that don't get talked about enough either. But yeah, your memories of Sika, you even worked for them once.
I did. It was the Gary Albright Memorial Show, or the tribute show. But I have a lot more dealings with them. Not really on a consistent level, but I was very tight with Maddie, Rosie from Rosie and Hurricane. So rest in peace to him as well. Really great guy. Anytime I was ever around the Samoan family, whether it was all of them, some of them, one of them, because if we came to Orlando at the time, I believe, because they lived in excuse me. Often Sika, I think, would come by. A couple of people, the kids would come by. For all I know, I met the Usos and Roman Reigns when they were kids. That's how old I am. So they're such, how should I say? I don't want to kill their gimmicks. They're just some of the most loving, caring, generous people that you'll ever meet inside or outside the business. If they like you, they love you. Even if they don't like you, they kind of leave you alone. If you just respect them, obviously, you've heard the stories about Haku. That's not just limited to him. I'm sure Alpha, Sika, Roman Reigns, even Jay and Jimmy, everybody, they can defend themselves and they can scrap. But their strongest point is the fact that each and every one of them have family members. I put Lloyd in there as well, who's still in the Indies. They have incredible hearts, incredible giving hearts, and they've always treated me with nothing but love and respect. And they affectionately used to call me Richie, which is, I never correct them. It's cool. I love it. Have a nickname, but not enough good stuff can be said about them. And what they do, if you want to talk about it in a wrestling sense, think about the legacy, not only just the Samoan family, that these guys, often Sika and everybody around them, were responsible for training and getting ready, and also drawing money for wrestling companies, but also they trained people that weren't in the family. They trained different wrestlers out there. A lot of great wrestlers came out of under the learning tree of people like Sika.
Why did, and I imagine Vince Sr. did as well, but why did Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. have such affection for the Samoans and vice versa? Because with McMahon Jr., I get the feeling that he was never really close to too many wrestlers or people who worked for him in a genuine sense. But The Undertaker is a great example of one who he was very close to and still is, I imagine. But why the Samoans? Why was he so close to the Samoans, and why does Vince have so much respect and vice versa for them?
Well, maybe Vince, there's family and loyalty. That would be kind of on their crest, on their family crest is family, loyalty, and family really does help each other out, whether it be financially, whether it's with, checking on them or just being available to help. Eki's another one. Umaga, very kind, big heart, big smile. I would say maybe Vince, in his own way, really respects people that are loyal to a family. Like the McMahons had a lot of loyalty within. It was a family-run business, and he really does. I kind of think it is leaning towards loyalty. They're very loyal people. Because you look at the other stuff with people like the Warrior, even Savage to a degree, or other people that left the company, where I had heard rumors that it personally hurt Vince that they weren't loyal to him and didn't stay.
Did they turn up to WWE shows often, just backstage to say hello? Were the constant presences in the back, when you're in the right area?
Yeah, I mean, normally catering, I think, would be where the family would come in, or you'd see them come into the arenas. Also, if any of them were working on indies or whatever, I'm sure they gave them dark matches or heat matches and other things to see, how are they progressing? How are they coming along and stuff like that. So there's a process. Even if you're in a Samoan family, all these people you see on TV in the bloodline right now, even Rocky. Rocky worked as Flex Cabana down in Memphis for months. He worked in the tracks training with Tom Pritchard. They, they paid their dues and they spent years to get to that spot. And a lot of people do that, but in this vein, at this time in 2024, where you just show up to NXT and learn how to wrestle, if you see a guy go into there like Solo, he was already trained before he went to NXT. He was already broken in an old school way and has an advantage over these people that are trained in the factory system.
I've got a couple of things to mention to you about Sika, or Afrin Sika, really. One I heard yesterday, that I thought was a funny story, is that during the trial, the steroid trial, the federal trial with Vince McMahon in 94, I think. I think it was 94 when that was. And apparently throughout the trial, I don't know if it was just when the verdict was coming back, it was either Afa or Sika was sat in the public gallery and he was mouthing towards the jury, "Not guilty, not guilty."
I heard about that, yeah.
Which is amazing. I thought that was funny. The other one actually comes from Dutch Mantel himself. He messaged me yesterday because he wanted to talk about Sika. And he gave me a really fun story. He said the first time he'd ever heard he was wrestling them, this was back in the old Georgia territory. I think it was maybe even when he was still wrestling for Ann Gunkel. So this was like 72, 73, wherever it was, early 70s. Still at the time when Ted Turner would actually just go to the channel and he'd say hello to everybody and that kind of thing. This is how early it was on. And he, for whatever reason, had decided that he wasn't going to sell the headbutt. And he was just like, I don't know who these people are. I'm not going to sell a headbutt like that if I headbutt them. And then he saw them. And he saw that he was like, I don't know, 210. And he saw these guys who were over 300 pounds each, wild hair and everything. And he saw them. Do you know what? I probably am going to sell for you, actually. So there you go. That was it.
Oh,
so,
Dutch,
yeah.
what's Dutch is saying? It's all the truth except for the lies I made up.
And stay in your lane as well. That's the other one that he likes.
That's the best. You know what? Keep your mouth shut and stay in your lane are the two best things that can lead to a 30+ year wrestling career.
Absolutely. On that note, we're gonna shut down the show and thank everybody for watching. Normally these
Not
shows
for good, right?
Oh,
Not
no,
for good.
just until next
Okay.
week. Just until next
checking.
week, I assure you. We're going to be out every single Friday. It's going to be different times on the podcast and the YouTube channel. As I say, this is when we did the interview the week before to publicise the pod show. Damn it! Oh, I nearly got through 2 damn hours with that one and messed it up. That we said, oh, okay, we'll do it in a few weeks. We'll have a few weeks to get going. And then you said to me, oh, let's just speed it up. Let's just get it going. And I went, yeah, okay, that sounds like a good idea. So basically, we gave ourselves 7 days to work out all the graphics and the setup and how this podcast is going to be, which is why we've been talking so much for the last week, is basically just trying to flesh out what we're doing with this show and make it more than a podcast. And over the next few weeks, things will be improving. We're going to be getting more, as we say, graphics and factoids and stuff like that. We've got a very, very quick turnaround with this episode for various reasons that we'll probably go into a later date at some point. It was just sort of like fleshing out technical issues and that kind of thing. But we will very much invite your criticisms and comments, well, your praises. If you don't like it, we don't invite that at all. But we very much invite your, what you want to see from us. We'll eventually come out with an email that you can submit questions to us for that we'll refer to at the end of the shows. What you want to hear. We'll probably be doing some extra stuff. We may even have a members section on the YouTube membership with extra stuff for people who can't get enough of the Stevie Richards Show and Stevie Richards analysis and that kind of thing. Some behind-the-scenes stuff and anything else you want to see, within reason, within YouTube guidelines, of course. So that's really what it is, as my end of the sign off. But you are the eponymous Stevie Richards of the Stevie Richards Show. So the outro is all yours.
Thank you. That's one word I don't know. I hope it's a good word.
It's named after you.
Oh, thank you. No, I meant the adjective before you said my name.
Oh, what did I say?
You already forgot?
Yeah, a CTE. I told you, man.
Anonymous or I forget.
No, eponymous. Eponymous. You are. It's named after you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I learned a new word today. I hope everybody else did as well. Yes, this is episode one of the Stevie Richards Show. As we said in the beginning, and James just said, we're always working to improve. We want to bring the highest quality content as well as presentation, but obviously want to give a different presentation, higher quality, broadcast quality presentation, as I said in the initial trailer. But the most important part is James and I are really humbled by the fact that we're almost at 10,000 subscribers as we record this episode that hasn't yet been uploaded. The immense amount of support before we even uploaded the trailer video really humbles us, and we're very grateful for that. Once again, your feedback, whether good or bad, is going to be accepted, is going to be taken. Any way that we can improve this. Also, on the member thing, one thing we're hashing out is maybe even having you vote for different assets, even the lower thirds, all that to get you a little bit more involved in the production process. So we're working on that. Please be patient. But most importantly, once again, thank you to each and every one of you out there. And hopefully you'll be back for episode two. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, click the bell to get notified. Also follow James and myself. We also may have some links in the description below that you might want to check out, might be interested in, that helps support both of us, WSI and the Stevie Richards Show. Most importantly, thank you guys so much. I said thank you enough, but I can't say it enough. God bless each and every one of you. Have a great day.